In terms of today, what I'm going to do is we're going to be talking very quickly about personality types and your particular personality types and the impact that's going to have on stress, okay, and what it might mean for you. So for those who haven't completed personality profiles in the past, I have a couple of slides I'm going to share with you, which will just give you some insights into the different personality types. So for this exercise, I'm going to need you all to have a pen and paper ready. Does everyone have a pen and paper ready? Okay, good. So Sharon, you shouldn't need this because you should remember your personality type, but we'll forgive you this on this occasion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a number of slides here, which will just reflect the different personality types. And we're utilizing what's called the Myers-Briggs framework for this. Okay, and as I show you these couple of slides, it's literally just for you to decide which side of things you are on. All right. Okay, so I'm going to do a share screen and we will be able to get them there. Okay. Okay. Can everybody see that? Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so look. The Myers-Briggs, just to say the Myers-Briggs framework, what it does, it's a type-based personality assessment, and it looks to give you, across 4 different parameters, a characterization of what it is that's most representative of your personality type. It's not a measure of competence, it's a measure simply of preference, okay? So it means that you could be, you might be doing something and be very effective at it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the thing that's going to stop you doing something else. So I always say personality is a little bit like if you play sport. If you play football and you're right-footed and you always go to kick with your right foot, okay? But if you decide you want to become a professional footballer, you probably need to learn to kick with both feet. And even though after a period of time you can kick with both right and left feet, it doesn't mean that you necessarily will stop being right-footed, okay? The challenge can be that when we operate outside of our personality type, it tends to cause us more stress. And that's why this is relevant to this particular topic today, because a lot of what might be going on might be pushing some of you outside of your personality type. Now, there's not a lot we're going to do to change your personality type, nor would we want to, okay? But what we're going to do is allow you to understand the potential stressors that are out there so that you can utilize the stress management techniques, which is part of the whole MyNow program, more effectively. Okay. It also means to be prepared for these situations as they arise. All right. So look, the very first one we're going to talk about is extroversion versus introversion, and we often hear these as terms that are used, which is just simply, you know, I'm an extrovert, I'm an introvert. There's often, I suppose, a stereotypical view of this, which is an extrovert is, you know, you're great with people and you're out there with people, and an introvert is you sit in a corner and you don't talk to anyone. That's not necessarily true, okay? It's more to do with where you get your energy from. So typically extroverts will get their energy from being around others, and introverts may get their energy from having time to think and reflect on things. So as it says there, an extrovert, I love time with people. If it's an important job, I get stuck in. If I have something to say, I'll talk. I like variety and action, and people will say I am enthusiastic, okay? Versus introversion, I love time to think. If it's an important job, I think it through. If I have something to say, I'll mail or text. I quite like quiet time. People who don't know me may say that I am quiet, okay? So what I want you to do is just thinking about that, to write down whether you would see yourself as either an E or an I. So which would be most reflective of your particular type? Everybody got that? Can people work that one out? Do they reckon whether they're E or I? Or is anyone struggling?
Can you be a bit of both?
Yeah, so you can absolutely be a bit of both. And this is, it's like, I suppose if you look at it, it's a spectrum. I'll just do that. I'll just stop share here so you can see me. So it's like a scale, okay? And if we say this is extrovert and this is introvert, you could be at the extreme extrovert or the extreme introvert, or you could be somewhere in the middle. So when someone says they might be a bit of both, they could be close to the middle from one side. But if we think in most situations, what do you prefer? So typical things you might think about is if you are someone who is very extrovert, a lot of your social activities will tend to center around being with people. Okay, so it might be a lot of things you do outside of work. If you're more introvert side, the things you do to recharge might be more spending time alone, reading a book, doing a jigsaw. So things like that that might require thinking. Even the way so a typical process for an extrovert will be to think and talk simultaneously, whereas an introvert tends to think before they talk. Okay, so an extrovert will typically, they might come into you in a work day and say, oh, there's an awful problem. We didn't get that delivery and I don't know what to do. God, what do we do? What do we do? Maybe I'll call the guy in the other office and see if they can help us out. And they'll go and do that. And that might be an extrovert, whereas an introvert may think before they come to you and present with the solution. All right, so look, why is that relevant? I suppose thinking about the situation that you're in right now, some might say that it's more of a stress-free situation for someone who's very introvert because you're working from home and you don't have to have all the day-to-day social interactions. And that may be true, okay? That may be true. I was working with another client yesterday, we were discussing this exact topic, and they said that whilst there is some truth to that, they also said that because of the pressure to have video conferences like we're having now, there's almost more of a pressure to communicate, because when you're on a video conference, you kind of feel you got to talk. So, you can't be passive in it. Whereas in work, you can communicate through a variety of things. So it might just simply be the body language you present sitting at your desk might say, I'm really busy, leave me alone. Whereas when you're having to go to a video conference, you can't really do that, okay? So it's thinking about how you manage those things and also thinking about how you manage the interactions that you have. There's a thing that happens during crisis situations whereby people will, I suppose, revert more to a task-based approach to leadership, which is I need to over-control the situation, okay? And most of us will fall into this. But it's thinking about how do you interact with your managers, with the people that you work with, around what level of communication is going to be appropriate for you. So it might be that if I'm more on the extrovert side, I might say, well, look, I actually need to have that bit of social interaction. Things like this, the MyNow approach might be something that's really helpful to you, just to hear the voices going on and realize there's still a lot going on in terms of social interaction. Someone who's more on the introvert side might say, I'm actually happy enough to keep the head down and get on with the work. And look, I'll just, I'll give you a nod towards the end of the week and I'll just let you know how things are going on. And if we need to call, we'll call, but we don't have to call if we don't have to call. Now, an extrovert hearing that goes, ooh, there must be something wrong with them. But we will all think with personality types that our personality type is the best type. And if the world was full of more people just like us, it'd be a much better place. But that's not true, okay? So it's the acceptance of difference. And for a lot of you who lead people and are leaders in the business, that's going to be something that's very important. So I would be encouraging you all as leaders to ask individuals, what is it you need from me as your leader? Ask your clients, ask your customers, what do you need? How much communication is the right amount of communication? How little is enough? And also for you to communicate to your own managers and say, look, this is a whole new weird way of working for me. This is what's going to work best for me going forward. Okay. Does that make sense? On our EI? And I'm conscious we're going on a whistle stop, but there'll be stacks of stuff you can read after this. So it's just a case of thinking about it. Think of the stressors you have felt in recent times and just asking yourself, was it linked to the personality type that I might have? Okay. All right. So I'm just going to go back into my share screen here and we're going to go back to our slides. Everybody see that? Yeah. Okay, great. So the next one we talk about is sensing versus intuitive. Okay, and again, same as before, I'd like you just to look at the two different sides here and decide whether you are either S or N. So for intuition, we use N because I has already been used on the extrovert introvert scale. So sensing, I deal in what's real. I like hard data. I enjoy talking about what we are doing. I like things that are practical. Good decisions are based on fact and an agenda is for structure. Versus intuition, I deal in what's possible. I don't mind ambiguity. I enjoy talking about what could be done. I like things that are imaginative, gut feel and hunches are valuable, and an agenda is a starting point. So this is quite an interesting one as we go through the COVID-19 crisis right now. If you're more on the S side of things, you are very much into data and information. So you may find yourself craving the stats, the numbers, the research. How many cases are there? How many deaths are there? What's the percentage? What's the mortality rate? What's happened in the UK? What's happened in the US? What's that mean in terms of age? And whilst having all that information can be enlightening and helpful. Given that the answers to a lot of the questions we have cannot be answered by anybody, that can be a cause of stress for you, okay? Now, it's a balancing act, because if there's no data, then you will feel uncomfortable as well. More on the N side is more of the thinking what's possible. So I suppose a typical differentiator between S's and N's is optimism and pessimism, where N's are seen as more of an optimistic viewpoint, S's may be seen as more pessimistic. Now, nobody out there ever admits they're a pessimist, but they may call themselves a realist. And if you're a realist, you're probably seen as a pessimist by someone who's an optimist. So it all depends on the perception that's there. But as an S, you may be more inclined, due to the fact that you're doing so much of the data side of things, seeing the negative stories, okay? And I keep talking about, I know last week for those who are on the call, I keep talking about how numbers have been construed by media to create maximum impact for individuals. So again, we talked about our NATs, our negative automatic thoughts last week. And the one example I keep giving is on the news media, 20% of people who get the COVID-19 will require medical intervention or hospitalization. And that sounds terrifying. But if someone says 80% of people who get COVID-19 don't need any interventions whatsoever, it sounds great. And it's the same story spun both ways. But if you're more S, you'll focus more on that negative story. And if you're more N, you look for the positive within the negative. Okay. So again, just thinking about which side you are. So writing down that whether you are S or whether you are N, okay? And be honest with yourself. There is no right or wrong in these things. And that's an important thing to think about as well. So where an N will tend to see the possibilities, okay? And a lot of N's tend to be entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs can often, push the boundary too far. An S is someone who's very much someone who can balance that out by saying, well, look, we got to do our due diligence. We got to do our research. We got to see our facts. And that's in any commercial or business setting, that's a hugely powerful set of skills to have. But working with each other and allowing yourself to understand that is what's going to allow you to manage that stressful piece. Okay. There was an interesting thing I was looking at yesterday. It was, I don't know if probably most of you will be younger than me, but there was a guy, Phil Matthews, used to play rugby for Ireland, and he works in I suppose similar age to myself, but he did a podcast on optimism and pessimism, and he was talking about, there was a guy, what was his name? It'll come back to me. But anyway, he was a Vietnam pilot for the US, went to a prisoner of war camp, was there for 8 years, survived and came out the other side. And when he's asked why he survived, he says, well, the optimists didn't survive because they kept saying, oh, it'll be better soon. So it'll be better by Christmas. It'll be better by summer. It'll be better by we'll be released by, and those dates came and went. Whereas the pessimists said, oh, we'll never get out of here. So the pessimists were proven right because it took 8 years and they survived. Now, I kind of take that with a pinch of salt, but I suppose the premise of what he's saying is that whilst being optimistic can be terrific, we need a little bit of realism in there as well in order to balance that out. So as I say, it's continually asking yourself the questions as to which side you are on. And again, for your teams as leaders, seeing what's going to work best for them. Okay. Make sense? Okay, good stuff. All right. So T's versus F's. Okay. So again, two different sides here. So T, logic's always good. People say I'm tough-minded. I like truth over tact. I consider myself to be reasonable. I like brief and I like concise communication. Versus F, logic will often lack sympathy. People say I'm caring and patient. Tact over truth. I consider myself to be compassionate, friendly and sociable communication. So again, a key differentiator here would be, if you're on the T side, you are very logical. Okay, so you see logic as being the most important decision-making process for you to work through. Okay, if you're on the F side, you tend to want to consider people's feelings. Okay, and that will be the first thing that you will use as a driver for your decisions. Okay. And again, pros and cons of this. T's, as it says there, sometimes they can be seen as tough-minded, okay? Sometimes they can be seen as overly logical and not considering the emotions of the individuals that they're dealing with. Now, at a time like this, that can be a challenge as leaders because you need to manage the emotions of the individuals that you're working with. On the F side of things, certainly you can look to manage the emotions. But one of the challenges you can have if you're on the F side is that you may be trying to fix the problems for everyone. And you can't. You know, the 3 words I always like to live your life by are control the controllables. Again, I had a workshop yesterday and I had somebody who was talking about someone in their team who's based here and their fiance is based in France. So obviously they can't see them. And this is the way their relationship had been, but she would go over for one weekend, he would come over for the next weekend. That's the way it's been for ages. But now they haven't seen each other for ages. And they were trying to plan a wedding and blah, blah, blah. All very stressful. Okay. And she has been doing everything she can to try and fix this situation for the individual. But of course, it's a situation she cannot fix. Like she can't, unless she's got a Star Trek style transporter, she can't bring one or other person to the other country. So it's absolutely to show interest, to show the empathy, to show listening, but not to be taking that stress home with you. And someone who's more on the F side will tend to take on the stress of others. Okay. Someone who's more on the T side is likely to say, well, I can't fix that problem, so I'm not going to worry or stress about it. So T's in situations like this can often be more resilient and less likely to suffer the stress of others, but it means they can also lose the emotional connection with the people with whom they're working. Okay. So again, it's about asking yourself, what is needed from your team? What do you need to demonstrate? And what's going to allow you to be effective in these situations? Okay. Can everyone see whether they're a T or an F? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, look, in your day-to-day work, I always say the best example for this is if you have to fire someone because of a poor performance, someone who's on the T side will look at the logic and go, well, look, metrics are metrics. They didn't hit the numbers. They didn't hit the figures. They didn't hit the KPIs. They got to go. Someone who's an F is more likely to say, oh my God, they'll be so upset. What if they start crying? What'll I do? I might start crying myself. And that's more of an F type behavior to go through. Okay. All right. And then the final one is judging versus perceiving. Okay. So a J versus a P. So again, thinking about which side of this you're on. So J's, I like lists and plans. I like to organize. I like to be well prepared. I try to prevent risks and I like to be early. P's, I go with the flow. I like flexibility. I like the last minute rush. I like risks and I like to be on time. So this is a very interesting one during the COVID period. And the reason I suppose it's most interesting is J's are great at making plans and they love to have a plan. They love to plan out their day, their week, their month. They like to know what's coming up, okay? P's are much more likely to be able to flex and spin on their heel when they need to. Now, all plans have been thrown out the window in many ways with the particular situation that we're going through. So as a J, you are likely to be feeling quite stressed from this because trying to make a plan right now is nigh on impossible because no one knows when the COVID-19 thing ends. I mean, Leo Varadkar is making his announcement later today. We're all hanging on it going, is it a week? Is it 2 weeks? Are we, can I go to the pub in a month? What's going to happen? So we're asking all these questions and Leo Varadkar, nobody can answer that because no one knows. Nobody knows what's going to happen. So as a J, trying to make a plan in a treacle of uncertainty is a very difficult place to be. As a P, Ps tend to be more spontaneous and go with the flow because chances are they haven't made a plan in the first place. So we're not undoing any plans. We're just changing where we are right now. Okay. Ps don't like to be tied into plans either. They like that, it says there, they like to have that flexibility. So in some ways that can help you adjust to this new normal. The difficulty can be trying to reset for what's going to happen next, particularly for those you're working with. And for those of you in leadership positions, if you're more on the P side of things, others may be looking to you for certainty right now. There's the concept of what we call psychological safety, which is all about looking at how safe do the people feel right now. And plans, certainty, organization tends to make those around us feel safe. And for those of you who are leaders, that's something to bear in mind at the moment. Because as I say, not only are you managing your own stresses, you're managing the stresses of those you interact and you work with. Okay. I always say, if you want a simple analogy of whether you're J or P, think of your airport behavior when you're going on your holidays. The J's are the ones who arrive up with the plastic folder full of the boarding cards and the passports and all the bits and pieces. And the P's are the ones at the check-in desk taking stuff out of their case because it was too heavy. and trying to stuff it into their hand luggage. That's a typical JP. Or even how much time do you give yourself before your flight goes? J's are there 3 hours in advance. P's are legging it in the door at the last second. So they're two, I suppose, very, very different things that you might see happening. So can you see whether you would be a J or a P on that? Yeah. Okay. Now, it's an interesting one because sometimes people say, well, actually, I'm a J in work and I'm a P outside work. Because in work, you kind of have to be a little bit planful. You can't really just turn up and go, what's happening today? Let's just, sure, look, we'll give this a go and see what happens. You can't usually do that. So we can learn to operate outside of our type, as I said, but it's just thinking about what's your natural state. Because if we can get into our natural state as much as possible, our stress levels will come down. Okay, so at this point, everybody should have their 4-letter type like ESTJ or INFP or something like that. Everybody got that? Everyone got that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Brian, what are you today?
Sorry, there's a bit of an inside joke there, guys, between myself and Neil. So I've been on a bit of a journey as a leader over the last kind of 2 years, where I've become much more aware of my extroversion and my sensing and the various other flaws in my personality type. But today, Neil, I'm ESTP.
ESTP.
Well, I think what's interesting, guys, just in terms of, if I was to share my journey with you, is I've become much more conscious of my personality type. And when I'm dealing with people who have a different personality type to me, I try my best to adjust myself as best I can so that I can deal with them and I can understand what works for them, what doesn't work for them. So if they're an introvert, me speaking like a million miles an hour like I normally do and wanting something yesterday probably doesn't work. And it's funny. We did an exercise before with the resilience crew, I think, and TTM crew, where we had extroversion and introversion, and the extroverts were like, Jesus, will you just do it? And the introverts were, will you just tell me what you want us to do? So there's such massive differences in personality types that you got to be so careful, I think, Neil, in understanding your own and having to maybe bend yourself out of shape a little to understand, to shape yourself and how you deal with others with different personality types. So yeah, so Neil, for me, I'm ESTP.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd certainly see that it's coming through from yourself. What I would say is, so when Brian's saying, you have no flaws, Brian, no one has flaws. We just have preferences. Okay. So very important to bear that in mind. So what I'd say is, just in relation to this, I think the important point Brian makes there is just, how do we respond to other people? Because if we're trying to enforce our way of doing things onto those who are going to look to do some things differently, that's going to be a problem for us. So it's asking yourself in advance, or even asking out loud, what is it you need from me as a colleague, as a leader, as a service provider? What is it you need from me that's going to allow this relationship to work best? And people will be able to give you that insight. Okay. There's just one more thing I want to show you. I am conscious of time, but let me just do a quick share screen on this.
I got asked my personality type and they didn't, Nilo.
Well, you know, we just wanted to have the example there for you, Brian.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that, lads.
Yeah, because we're introverts.
All right. So what I want you to do is, again, looking at your personality types. Okay. So what we have is typical stressors that exist across your different types. So if you have someone who is an SJ, so any SJs here? Yeah, okay, a couple of SJs. So things that are going to stress you out, okay? And these are things that when they come at you, they will cause your stress response to kick in. Uncertainty, change, and missed deadlines. Now, if you think about right now, there is a lot of uncertainty. There is a lot of change going on. So those things, if you've got an SJ in your personality type, straight away, that is going to cause you to feel anxiety and stress. So be aware of that and be aware of what interventions am I undertaking, whether it's the mindfulness, the yoga, the exercise, whatever it is, whether it's reading a book, talking to a friend, whatever it might be, but just be aware of these are going to be stressors for you. What do you tend to do? You redefine objectives, check, recheck, allowing too much time. But in the uncertainty that we live in right now, we can't really redefine the objectives because we only have so much information. Who had an SP in their type? Any SPs? can't see everybody now for, yeah. Oh, there you go. Oh, no, we don't want to go there. Sorry, I'm having a technical failure here. Any SPs, just shout. No SPs in the group? Okay. NTs, who had an NT in their type? Any NTs? No, no NTs?
They're not normally this shy, Dilo, let me tell you.
Why not? Any NFs? Did every single person have an SJ in their type? I'm just going to go out of, I'm going to go out of this share screen here. Hands up if you had SJ in your type. Put your hand up. Not everybody did. Okay, so that means someone has something. Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to go. What I'll do is I'll just go through. I'll go through the 4 types, and we'll allow you to decide yourself what you wrote down. You don't necessarily need to share it with me. Okay, so what we have. So if you were someone who had an SP in your type, things that are going to bother you: boredom, being told how to work, not enough facts. So again, thinking about the current situation, you may not be bored because there's a lot going on, but you may find you're being told how to work more. There is more, because of the way we have to lead right now, there is more micromanagement can go on because we're looking to control the situation and people can't see. If I'm in an office or if I see you or if we're in touch day to day, it may be a case of I kind of know how you're getting on and I can see whether things are going well. So as an SP, that may be an issue. And what can happen is you just withdraw, and withdrawing because we're working from home can become easier. For NTs, routine, bureaucracy, tight structure. Again, so when we've got someone here who really just does not want to be structured into every hour is a video conference, every half hour is a new video conference I got to jump onto, that can become an issue. If I'm being overly tied into KPIs over the short term, that can become an issue. And that's why having conversations is going to be so important. Asking the individuals, what is it you need or what is it I need in order to work through this? And for the NFs, conflicts, letting people down, and personal treatment. And there can be a real sense, because all of those we're working with are feeling stressed and anxiety. We want to do our best for them, particularly on the NF side. So we're going to try to do things for them. And I suppose the key watch out here is we can, as it says there, we can become self-sacrificing, which in essence means throwing ourselves on our own sword and trying to do too much for individuals. Okay. For problems that you often can't fix. So again, it's just bearing that in mind. So look, that's a kind of a whistle-stop tour of the personality types. I am conscious of time and we're just about out of time here. So look, it is important, as Brian says, to reflect on your type, think about how that impacts on you, think about the things that are going on right now that are likely to be causing you stress, and asking yourself, what interventions do I need to undertake in order to bring my stress levels down? We're not asking you to change your personality because that's not going to happen, but we are looking for you to adapt your style in order to get the most out of your day-to-day work.